we love, we love to do these visiting vignettes monthly to do a little bit of a deeper dive into individual disease states and kind of the journeys that people have walked through while experiencing this disease. And we really believe that this helps us be better visitors when we can understand other people, other diseases. And so we're never going to go visit somebody in a hospital and then be like, I have no idea what that is. I've never heard of it. So that's what these are for. And today we're very excited to have Greg Ruf, a longtime member of Mended Hearts, personal friend, and the executive director of the Dilated Cardiomyopathy Foundation, here with us today to talk about his journey and to give us a little more detail about the dilated cardiomyopathy space. So Greg, thank you for joining us.
Very good. Thanks, Andrea, for having me, and thanks for those that are attending today and will be seeing this. I very much appreciate you being visitors to patients and how important that is. I've been a Mended Hearts member for I don't know, 8-9 years. And actually have done quite a bit of visiting. I'm in Columbus, Ohio. So I did visiting through Mended Hearts at the Ohio State University Ross Heart Hospital. So kind of know the program and what a great and what a helpful program that is. My journey basically is that I was diagnosed in 2014 with dilated cardiomyopathy. And what dilated cardiomyopathy is that essentially you've got some type of disease that is either brought on, and I'm giving very round numbers, dilated cardiomyopathy about 50% of the time is caused by or brought on by a heart attack, coronary artery disease. So somebody has a significant heart event, a heart attack, something like that. The question is, was there muscle damage? Was there, heart damage? And if the question is yes, you then fall in the dilated cardiomyopathy category. So about 50% comes from heart attack, coronary artery disease. The other 50%, and people will talk about drug-induced, alcohol-induced, viral, but I'm giving some rough buckets. The other 50% basically is genetic-based. So there are known to be about 40 genes that cause dilated cardiomyopathy or can cause dilated cardiomyopathy. About 12 of which are, are pretty nasty and significantly disease-causing. The other ones, and I may be off a number or two here, the other ones are the other, say 32, they know are involved, but they're not sure how disease-causing they are. So about 50% of dilated cardiomyopathy is genetic-based. Again, kind of rough numbers. What happens when you get dilated cardiomyopathy? A couple things can happen. One is, and the most common is, you have heart failure. So your heart or your left ventricle dilates, gets bigger, and the muscle weakens. So the lining gets thinner, hypertrophic, the lining gets thicker, but in dilated gets thinner, the left ventricle. And what tends to happen over time is your heart enlarges to try to keep up with getting blood to the body, and your ability for your muscle, your left ventricle, to squeeze, or your ejection fraction decreases typically over time, and which makes it more difficult. Ejection fraction is a word people use to talk about, sort of the muscle damage in dilated cardiomyopathy, which is how much blood is squeezed from your left ventricle out into your body. And a normal person would have an ejection fraction of, say, 60–65%, which means they squeeze about 65% of the blood in their left ventricle out into their body each beat. When you have dilated cardiomyopathy and you get muscle damage, that number decreases. And I spent 3 years, it was declining over time. I spent 3 years with a 20% ejection fraction, which means my heart was only pumping 20% to 65%. So that causes a lot of issues, lightheadedness, fatigue, a lot of different things. The second aspect of, and the less known aspect of dilated cardiomyopathy can be arrhythmogenic. So we know that there's a disease called ARVC, which is arrhythmogenic ventricular cardiomyopathy, which attacks your electrical system of your heart, and it causes ventricular tachycardia, AFib or atrial tachycardia. It can cause PVCs, but it basically disrupts your electrical system. And that's a component that can be of really a number. I think hypertrophic, I think ARVC, certainly DCM. So there's a arrhythmogenic component. So for my instance, I had what's called left bundle branch block and third-degree heart block, which means my gene, or the lamin A gene, not only caused muscle damage, it also caused electrical damage, which basically caused my heart to shut down electrically and created these PVCs, AFib, atachycardia, or ventricular tachycardia, which in those instances, if there is an arrhythmogenic component, they are most likely going to give you what's called an ICD, which is a pacemaker and a defibrillator. One, to help your heart beat better, because when your electrical system shuts down, your heart doesn't beat properly. It tends to slow down, doesn't beat anymore. And there's also the risk of sudden death from ventricular tachycardia or something like that. So I had both, and those are the two things that sort of dilated cardiomyopathy causes. DCM probably affects more than 1 million people in the United States. It's a pretty big disease. It's part of the cardiomyopathy group. And when we talk about cardiomyopathy in general, the big, I think 5 are dilated cardiomyopathy, hypertrophic cardiomyopathy, ARVC, which is ventricular, which is arrhythmogenic. It causes your heart to do all sorts of silly things. There is left ventricular non-compaction cardiomyopathy, and the 5th is restrictive cardiomyopathy. So those are the real big 5 in cardiomyopathies. There's some smaller pieces and other things, but I would say those are the big 5. And DCM is the #1 cause of heart transplant. I think it's around 40 to 50%. 50% is probably a good number of all heart transplants are because of dilated cardiomyopathy. And I think about 1/3 of the people that have heart failure have, it's because they have dilated cardiomyopathy. And in my journey, I was diagnosed in 2014. As I mentioned before, I had both the muscular and the electrical issues because of my gene. One of the 12 big genes in dilated cardiomyopathy, lamin A, tends to cause issues, both of those issues with the heart. So over time, I think when I was diagnosed, as I mentioned, in 2014, I had about a 35% ejection fraction, again, left bundle branch block, 3rd-degree heart block, and the issues with my ejection fraction decreased over time to where 4 years ago, I ended up having an ejection fraction of about 20%. And the arrhythmogenic component was getting stronger, the VTAC, ATAC episodes, and the PVCs. So I actually went on a anti-arrhythmatic drug called amiodarone to help quiet the crazy arrhythmias in the heart, and kind of lived with that for about 3 years ago. And then a year and a half ago, I was put on the heart transplant list at Ohio State University Ross Heart Hospital in I think early May. And but my heart failure continued to worsen. The arrhythmogenic component continued to worsen. I was hospitalized on July 1st, 2021. And on July 15th, I had a heart transplant. I think was released on July 24th and have been recovering since then. But, amazing. I feel 10 times better than I did before. And I'm working, 50 hours a week, 55 hours a week, exercising, chasing grandkids, all those things, and living and loving life. And a few more minutes to talk about, when I was diagnosed, we realized I was working with a long time, one of the first researchers on genetic dilated cardiomyopathy, a guy named Dr. Ray Hirschberger. And he was actually treating me at Ohio State. And he had mentioned, Greg, this is a huge disease and there is no patient family group to support these people. And so we started out, end of 2017, beginning of 2018, we created the DCM Foundation, Dilated Cardiomyopathy Foundation. First thing we did was put a website together. It was really, really important that, because when I was diagnosed, there really wasn't good information, complete good information. So we set out to put, what we would consider a very complete website together about dilated cardiomyopathy. And we then my disease was worsening around 2020, mid 2020, I had to quit work. So I devoted a lot more time to the foundation, and we've been able to grow it to provide information, education, the website. We have webinars, a conference, a lot of good information, blogs, articles. A lot that we do actually is in partnership with like Mended Hearts and other groups. We think it's really, really important that we all work together to get the most complete and best information to patients with any sorts of heart problems. We're starting now patient family support groups, and that's going to grow into a number of options. And the third really pillar or area that we've been working on DCM Foundations is to create a genetic awareness campaign. About 50% of all cardiomyopathies have a genetic component, but only 1% of diagnosed cardiomyopathy patients ever get genetically tested. So we're working with a number of groups, including Mended Hearts, on a campaign that will launch in 2023 about making all cardiomyopathy patients aware of the need for genetic testing, understanding the genetic component, and that you should get tested. If you are idiopathic, or they don't know where it came from, didn't come from a heart attack or coronary artery disease, you really ought to get genetically tested. It could save you and your family lives while also providing much more information for researchers and biopharma companies to further research the disease and create potential drug therapies. So we're very, very excited about that. And lastly, I think we're 12 minutes in. The one thing that I really want to also discuss is, the importance and the need to be part of a group like Mended Hearts. The fact that you're visiting and talking to patients, you see the need of having, either individual buddies or support people to talk to, or programming like this that Mended Hearts provides, or different, heart groups provide, because going this alone is very scary and very difficult. And I think the more, global support or individual support that people get going through any type of heart disease, really improves their outcomes. And also, I think, improves their mental state, because they know they've got someone they can go to ask questions to. They know they can go to someone to talk to. And I think that's really, they can lean on and support someone that's gone through something very similar to them. That's really, really important. So always, support is great. I think the visiting program that Mended Hearts has is wonderful, and glad to see, I know everything got shut down during COVID, and glad to see things opening up. I hope they'll continue to open up, and I'm sure they will in the future, and that, you are able to visit more and more people and really help support and improve their lives. So that's it. So Andrea, that's kind of what I have. Are there any questions that you have for me, or something I didn't cover?
That was fabulous. And I actually learned so much. Thank you so much for sharing. So if anybody has any questions, please type them into the Q&A box or into the chat box, and we'll get those to Greg. But in the meantime, I think two things. Number one, have you had your family tested for genetics? And what did that show? Was it a problem, and how are you handling that if it is?
Yeah, no, excellent question here. Thank you. I should have brought that up. So yeah, so it's interesting as we start this genetic awareness campaign, people say, well, should I get tested? Should I get tested? And when I was diagnosed and they didn't say, Mr. Ruf, we don't know where your cardiomyopathy, dilated cardiomyopathy came from. We'd like to do genetic testing, again, which most cardiologists, most heart failure institutions don't do. Because we'd like to figure out where it came from. Do you mind if we do genetic testing? It was an automatic yes. And when I found that I had, potentially actually 3 genes, 2 lamin A genes, 331 and 399, and a gene called TPM1 that's somewhat associated with dilated cardiomyopathy. The fact that I had 3 gene mutations and realized that was the cause of my dilated cardiomyopathy, the next step is should we get other people in our family tested? And it really was no question to me. And really, there were a couple of holdouts in family. I think we had 9 additional people genetically tested. And most of them have, I think all of them have 1, 2, or all 3 genes. The way I really presented it to my family is that you really need to do this because of, number one, there's a couple of reasons in why you should be genetically tested if a family member has dilated cardiomyopathy, genetic dilated cardiomyopathy. One is because they want to take a baseline. If they test positive, well, if they test negative, then you're off the hook and you live life and have fun. But if you test positive, whether you test or not, it's always hanging over your head. Like, I don't want to know, but even if you don't know, it's still hanging over your head. But if you test positive, they can do tests, Norman ECG, echocardiogram, maybe a Holter monitor, which is not, bad anymore. They can find a baseline where you are, see if there's any arrhythmias happening, see if there's any muscle issues. And then you can go back every 1, 2, 3 years and get tested again. So if the disease begins, they can catch it early. And as we all know, with almost any heart disease, the earlier they catch it, they can actually slow the progression of the disease down. That's 1. 2, if your genetic dilated cardiomyopathy has an arrhythmogenic component, you could die of sudden death of ventricular fibrillation. And so if they identify that, they potentially could put an ICD in, which could save your life. So I think it's really important. In our family, it was never a question about getting genetically tested. And I was very adamant that people did. But I know, a lot of people have trepidations, fears, things like that, which I don't fully understand. Also, dilated cardiomyopathy, there is no cure right now. So if you get it, you can there is no common path of dilated cardiomyopathy. We have people that we know have been diagnosed with 40 years and are actually better today than they were at 55 than they were at 40. We also know people where it's progressed rather quickly and they have unfortunately passed away or had a heart transplant. So there is no common path. There is no common time frame. You Google it, they'll tell you what the average is, which scares everybody. But there's no cure right now. Companies are working on that. It's genetic-based therapies and cures. But getting tested early, understanding that you have it, that's really, really important. Thanks, Andy. So.
Great. So I do have one question from the audience. The question is, did your genetic findings play against your eligibility for transplant?
No, absolutely not. No, and it probably, I can't say it's more favorable. So if you have a genetic cardiomyopathy and you get a new heart, you no longer have that genetic cardiomyopathy. So it takes it away. Now, maybe if I lived another 100 years, maybe it creeps back in. But from what my doctors are telling me and what I have other doctors telling me is I no longer have genetic dilated cardiomyopathy. I have a new heart. And the fact that it wasn't lifestyle created, I wasn't overweight, I didn't have diabetes, I didn't smoke, I probably drank too much, but that's a different question altogether. I like my beer. It's really important that I always took care of myself, and it wasn't a self-induced problem, because if you are overweight, or if you're a drug addict, or you smoke, or you drink, or you may have other comorbidities that might decrease your success rate of a transplant, that's credited against you to get a transplant. So I actually think if you're fairly healthy and have lived a healthy lifestyle and it's genetic, I bet you have a better chance of getting a heart, quite honestly. That's a great question. I never thought of it, but that's a really good question. Thank you.
Yeah, because I guess that would be a kind of a scary road to be on if they maybe weighed that into, receiving a heart or not. So the other question that I had that I didn't ask, I think you answered, but I know that hypertrophic cardiomyopathy is sometimes attributed to sudden cardiac death. And so you say that also DCM has some of that component to it as well.
Yes, yes. There are a number of genes, and I'm not going to guess them all, but I know lamin A is one of the genes that has a arrhythmogenic component. I know that BAG3 is one of the gene mutations that has an arrhythmogenic component, and also DSP. And those are the, 3 of the, say, 12 really disease-causing genes. There might be a few more that I'm missing. I don't know the percentage, so I don't know if, I think a lower percentage of DCM patients actually have an arrhythmogenic component than hypertrophic, but I don't know that for sure. And then there are certain genes associated with ARVC that obviously cause arrhythmogenic components, and some of the genes cross over. So it's interesting, some of the genes aren't just DCM or aren't just ARVC or aren't just HCM related. They kind of, there's a chart I have, and some of them kind of cross over and can be 1, 2, or 3, which is interesting. And whatever we know about the genetic of each of these and how it's related is fairly in its infancy, and it'll continue to grow in the complexity and the relationship with these different types of cardiomyopathies and the genetic factors and which causes which will grow and change dramatically, I think, every year of the next 10, 20 years. So.
Yeah, fabulous. So another question that I have, do you know if insurance will typically cover the test of the genetic testing?
Yeah, so again, something I should have brought up, another great question, thank you, is yes. And so putting together the genetic, the cardiomyopathy awareness campaign, we spent a lot of time with providers that actually provide genetic testing services to patients, direct to patients. As I've talked to 2 in particular, one is called Vignette, one is Genome Medical. They don't actually do the testing, but they'll send the results to a couple different labs. But from what they're telling me, really anywhere from 2/3 to 80%, 65 to 80% of the patients they see actually are covered by their insurance for genetic testing. Another really, and the medical community errs in this, genetic testing for a full cardiomyopathy panel, like we're going to do in our genetic awareness campaign, our testing panel, used to be thousands of dollars. And I think the miscommunication, misinformation is people think it's still thousands of dollars. Honestly, the top cost, if insurance doesn't pay, and and sometimes the testing companies have sponsors that reduce the rate. But right now, through our program, the most out of pocket anyone would get paid to get tested and have 2 meetings with a genetic counselor, which is really important, is $379. And we all know, being a patient of cardiomyopathy so many years, I hit my max out of pocket every year with all the tests, all the visits, everything. So the reality, even if insurance doesn't pay, through our program, the max cost is $379, which, when I walk into a hospital or a doctor's office, you're not walking out without a cost of at least that amount of money. So great question.
So to finish up our half hour, boy, things go so fast when you're having fun, right? Marcia has asked, is the DCM Foundation in touch with charity cardiomyopathy.org here in the UK? So thanks for joining us from the UK, Marcia.
Yeah.
It says your foundation and this charity's goals are greatly aligned, which is very positive for raising global awareness and providing information, education, and encouraging patient advocacy. So it's cardiomyopathy.org. You might want to check that out, Greg.
Yes, no, thank you. Love to work. I've worked quite a bit with Joel Rose at Cardiomyopathy UK. We're working with Global Heart Hub on this project, but would love to, you you can just reach out at info@dcmfoundation.org and let's chat. Or again, would love to get together, because I agree. All of our patient organizations like this need to work together. And I know in as I was getting the DCM Foundation together, no idea what we were doing. We did a couple webinars with Jody and Andrea at Men at Hearts, and they were very, very helpful in getting us going and kind of showing us the ropes. So very, 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 very grateful for that. So thank you.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciate it. We hope that everything is well with the DCM Foundation and with your campaign. Everybody listening, we will be participating with their campaign, so it's exciting in 2023. And I will have this recording out to everybody in the next day or two, and it will be cataloged with our visiting vignette. So thank you all so much for joining us today. Greg,
Thank you all. Okay, have a great day.